Before we begin, pause with me for just a moment. If you've ever loved someone so deeply that the thought of losing them quietly sat in the back of your mind like a shadow you couldn't quite shake, if you've ever held on because letting go felt scarier than staying exactly the same, then this story is going to stay with you, perhaps longer than you'd expect. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. This channel doesn't just tell stories, it gives words to the emotions people carry every day but rarely have the courage to say out loud. These are the quiet truths that live between heartbeats. Now, let me tell you something I never imagined I would share with anyone. My name is Elise. I'm 44 years old, and for most of my life, I've only really known how to be two things: a mother and someone who learned, early and often, how to stay strong even when no one was watching. My son's name is Lenny. He's 22 now. But when I look at him, when I really look, I don't always see the tall, thoughtful young man the rest of the world sees. Sometimes I still see the little boy who used to grip my hand so tightly in crowded places that my fingers would ache. The same boy who would hide behind my legs whenever a stranger tried to speak to him. The boy who believed, with complete, innocent certainty, that as long as I was nearby, nothing bad could ever happen. It was always just the two of us. No partner to lean on. No second parent to share the weight of decisions, the late-night worries, the small victories. No one else to step in when exhaustion made everything feel impossible. Just me and him. We grew up together in a way most people don't understand. When you raise a child alone, you don't just guide them through life, you survive alongside them. Every bill paid a week late. Every night spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if you were doing enough, being enough. Every moment you told yourself, I'll rest later. Right now, he needs me. And when you walk through every storm side by side like that, something profound happens. You stop being just family. You become each other's safe place, each other's anchor, each other's entire small, carefully protected world. I didn't realize how fragile that world had become until one quiet evening changed the way I looked at everything. It was late when Lenny came home that night, much later than usual. I heard the front door open softly, almost apologetically, like he didn't want to disturb the silence. The sound of his shoes hitting the floor was slower than normal, heavier, as if each step carried extra weight. I was in the kitchen, pretending to focus on wiping down a counter that was already clean, when I glanced up and saw him standing in the doorway. He looked exhausted. Not the surface-level tired that comes from a long shift or too many classes, but the deeper kind, the kind that settles into your bones and lingers even after sleep. His shoulders were slumped forward like he'd been carrying something invisible for far too long. His eyes didn't really land anywhere. They just passed over the room, distant, unfocused, searching for something he couldn't name. You okay? I asked gently, keeping my voice soft, the way I always did when I sensed the air had shifted. He nodded without quite meeting my eyes. Yeah. But every parent knows this truth. There's a kind of yeah that doesn't mean yes at all. It's just the easiest word to say when the real answer feels too big, too messy, too frightening to voice. I didn't push him right then. Instead, I told him he could lie down in my room for a bit. It was warmer in there, quieter, the bed softer, the same small ritual we'd done countless times over the years when life felt too heavy for one person to carry alone. He followed me in silence. The room felt different that night. Not uncomfortable, not tense, just unfamiliar, like the walls had moved half an inch outward while we weren't looking. He sat beside me on the edge of the bed, hands resting in his lap, fingers slowly twisting together in that old anxious habit from childhood. His eyes stayed fixed on his hands, as if they held answers he didn't yet know how to ask for. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't know what my son was feeling. Not exactly. People talk a lot about how hard it is when children are small, the sleepless nights, the endless financial strain, the constant low hum of worry, but no one really prepares you for the other hard part. The moment your child grows up and you realize they don't need you the same way anymore. Not less love, but different. Looser. More space between you. For 22 years, I had been Lenny's shelter from the sharp edges of the world, his reassurance when doubts crept in, the person who made everything feel a little less frightening. But sitting there beside him, the lamplight soft on his face, I understood something that scared me more than any hardship we'd ever face together. He was becoming someone I could no longer protect from everything. And deeper still, I wasn't sure who I was without that role defining so much of me. Lenny finally looked up. There was something new in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. It wasn't childish dependence. It wasn't simple comfort-seeking. It was confusion. The quiet, aching confusion that comes when someone stands exactly between who they once were and who they expected, or afraid, to become. He looked caught, suspended between boy and man, unsure where he truly belonged. And in that shared silence, something painful settled into my chest. Maybe I didn't know where I belonged either. Because if he moved forward into his own life, if he started needing me less, then who was I allowed to be? Just Elise? Just a woman in her 40s, figuring out what comes after mum has been the answer to every question for so long? Before either of us could find the words, the doorbell rang, sharp, sudden, pulling us both back into the moment like a snapped thread. I stood up slowly and opened the door. It was our neighbor, Mark. He was the kind of person people describe as dependable without hesitation, always calm, always steady, the sort of man who notices when something needs fixing and offers help without turning it into a performance. He mentioned the building's heating, said winter was getting colder earlier this year, and asked if everything was working properly in our unit. His voice was casual, normal, neighborly. But when I turned back toward the bedroom for just a second, I saw Lenny watching us from the doorway. Not angry, not upset, just quiet, observant. Like he was noticing something shift in the air, even if he didn't fully understand what it meant yet. In that brief glance, Mark wasn't just the guy next door anymore. He represented something else entirely. New conversations, new routines, new possibilities. A life that didn't revolve entirely around being someone's mother. And I think Lenny felt that change too, felt the invisible boundary of our small world stretching, thinning, making room for more. When Mark left with a polite nod and a promise to check the thermostat later if needed, the house felt subtly different. Like something invisible had been acknowledged without a single word spoken aloud. Later that night, there was a soft knock on my door. Lenny stepped in slowly and sat beside me again on the bed. His hands were clasped tightly now, knuckles pale, like he was holding himself together by force. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice low and unsure, cracking just a little on the word. "I don't know what's wrong with me lately." That sentence landed harder than anything else he could have said. Because in it, I heard the pressure building, the fear creeping in, the weight of adulthood beginning to press down on shoulders that weren't quite ready yet. "I feel lost," he admitted, almost whispering, as if saying it too loudly would make it more real. Hearing that word, lost, broke something open inside me, because the truth was, I felt lost too. Not in the same way, but in a mirror version of it. This wasn't about romance or anything inappropriate. It wasn't about betrayal or scandal. It was about identity. For 22 years, he had been my son, my purpose, my daily gravity. For 22 years, I had been his mother, his constant, his safety net. But who are we beyond those roles? Who was he becoming in the wide, uncertain world outside our apartment? And who was I allowed to become when the shape of my days started to change, when the center of my gravity began to shift? Those questions sat between us, heavy and unanswered, filling the quiet room like smoke. As I held my son, arms around him the way I had when he was small, though now his frame was broader, his head resting higher on my shoulder, I realized something most parents are afraid to admit, even to themselves. Sometimes love holds on too tightly. Not out of control, not out of harm, but out of fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of becoming unnecessary. Fear of the silence that might follow when the house no longer echoes with small footsteps and shared routines. We didn't solve anything that night. There were no big revelations, no dramatic promises. We just sat there together in the lamplight, breathing the same air, feeling the same ache of change. And in that stillness, something began to loosen. Not the love, never the love, but the grip. The need to protect him from every shadow. The need to be everything to him. Slowly, painfully, we started making space for him to find his own way forward, and for me to rediscover who I could be when Mum became only part of the answer. It wasn't easy. It wasn't loud, but it was real. And sometimes the hardest moments in life aren't the ones that arrive with noise and drama. They arrive quietly, and change everything.